FBI files contain some of the most disturbing true crime horror stories. Investigators work on mysterious, unsolved cases that would likely creep out most people. Number 5. The 4th of July is supposed to be a time for celebration in the US, but for the community of Moscow, Idaho, Independence Day of 1981 was a day a true crime horror story was uncovered. The disturbing crime had actually taken place about a week earlier. Kristen Noel David was a bright young woman studying at the University of Ohio. She was 22 years old, a senior, and studying broadcast journalism and political science. On the afternoon of June 26, 1981, she was riding her bike from Moscow to nearby Lewiston. It was a fairly common route, and Kristen was one of a number of young women seen cycling along US Highway 95 between the two cities that day. Kristen would never make it to Lewiston, though. She was reported missing the following day, and as is often the case, a major search began. It wouldn't be until a week later that a fisherman on the Snake River found some of her remains. The rest of her body was found the following day, wrapped in packages from a local newspaper dated April of 1981. Her clothes and bicycle were never found. Multiple investigating agencies began working on the case, including the FBI. A number of items were taken from the crime scene and are regularly tested by investigators as technology improves. However, no updates have been made public. Information about this FBI case is closely guarded. Even facts like how Kristen passed away haven't been revealed, as this is information that could be used to determine if a confession is legitimate. The biggest lead that's been made public is a potential suspect. Witnesses spotted Kristen talking with a man in a brown van the day she vanished. The same man was seen talking to other female cyclists along Highway 95. He was described as white, in his 30s, weighing about 180 pounds and 5 feet 10 inches tall. He had a brown and reddish beard. The case has been linked by some to a number of other violent crimes in the Lewis-Clark Valley area. 4 other potential victims may have had their lives taken by the same person, but Kristen's case is treated as separate by investigators. Investigators believe new technology might lead to a break in the case soon. The FBI and other agencies have continued to appeal for anyone with information to come forward, even if they have already told authorities in the past. Information can be passed through tips.fbi.gov. Number 4. This year marks 13 years since John Weissbecker vanished from his home in Ocean City, New Jersey. Unlike other missing person cases, John's disappearance became an unsolved FBI case, as investigators believe he didn't disappear voluntarily. John was 21 years old at the time of his disappearance, and lived with his mother and younger sister. He had been working in restaurants since he was a teenager, and dreamed of owning his own one day. At the time of his disappearance, in March of 2009, he was unemployed due to the seasonality of his work, but was due to start a new job soon. From the outside, he didn't appear to have any problems and wasn't involved in any illegal activity, which only made the events of March 11th even more puzzling. He was home alone that day and was last seen at 11 a.m. when a postal worker came to deliver the mail. It was about an hour later when his mother called him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. It's believed that whatever happened to John happened at around this time. When his mother came home that afternoon, she found some of the furniture in the house was tipped over, with no sign of John. Realizing there was something very wrong, she reported him missing that same day. There's been little progress made in the case since John vanished. Nothing was taken from the house other than John's phone and wallet. His car was still parked outside, and his unemployment check was still piled in with the rest of the mail on the kitchen counter. Even without the overturned furniture, though, it was obvious to those that knew John that this wasn't a voluntary disappearance. He would drive everywhere, even if his destination was only a few blocks away, and it was very uncharacteristic of him to have his phone turned off. He hasn't used his phone since he vanished, and his credit cards and bank account have also not been touched. Police believe someone in the community knows what happened to John, but so far nobody has come forward. The hope is that as more time passes, whatever reason people have for keeping the answer a secret won't seem as important. John is described as being 6 foot to 6'2" and weighs between 180 and 200 pounds. He has many tattoos on his arms and chest, and had a mustache when he vanished. There's a $50,000 reward for information that leads to his whereabouts. The FBI Newark Division can be contacted on 963-792-3000. Number 3. In June of 1985, someone took the life of a Logansport man in a disturbing fashion in his own home. What makes this FBI case such a haunting true crime is the fact that there doesn't seem to have been any motive behind the crime. David Frust was a 32-year-old man who preferred to keep to himself. He was unmarried and lived alone in a house that he rented. According to neighbors, he didn't often have visitors. It was 2 days after he was last seen that anybody even noticed he was missing. On June 24th, his brother-in-law noticed he hadn't shown up for work at the manufacturing plant where they worked together. Concerned, he went to David's home to make sure he was all right. He found the front door open, and when he called inside, nobody responded. He went into the house to find David's body lying face down in the doorway between his living room and kitchen. He had been struck in the back of the head multiple times. Investigators determined that he had likely been attacked sometime on the evening of June 22nd or in the early morning hours of June 23rd. His neighbors didn't report seeing or hearing anything out of the ordinary, and there was no sign of forced entry at either David's front or back door. There was also no sign of a struggle in the house, and it seemed likely whoever had attacked David had caught him by surprise. Trying to piece together the last hours of David's life, police discovered 3 people had seen him on June 22nd. The first was his housekeeper, who cleaned as usual that morning. The other 2 were a male and female friend who stopped by the house at about 9 p.m. They stopped for about 30 minutes before leaving. They also hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary with David. Police investigated the pair but ruled them out. They were also able to rule out the crime as alcohol-related, or what a newspaper at the time described as gay-related. After appeals for information from the public, 2 boys came forward to say that they'd found an axe while playing in the Eel River. The river behind David's home and the axe was found about a mile away. Police determined that this was the weapon that had been used in the attack, but they couldn't find any other clues. A hotline was set up for tips, and a number of people were interviewed after tips were called in, but none of the leads panned out. To this day, what happened to David remains a mystery. His immediate family have since passed away, and there doesn't seem to have been much of a push to solve this cold case. Number 2. When 24-year-old Marta Cruz went missing from her home in Washington, D.C. in July of 1961, police weren't immediately concerned. Despite the fact her roommate thought it was very out of character for her to be absent, they didn't see any reason to suspect foul play. Then, on July 4th, her body was discovered in a creek beside a road in Lorton, Virginia. Her clothes were missing, as was her purse, but she was still wearing the jewelry she had with her when she disappeared. Marta was described as a shy young woman who was studying languages at university and lived with her sister and a roommate. She was originally from Bolivia, and her family were known to be part of high society in the country. This led to the true crime case getting a lot of attention at the time. But as more and more time went on without any updates, there was little coverage of the case. She worked as a clerk typist at Washington Hospital Center and was last seen on July 1st, 1961. She had gone to cash her 2-week paycheck at a clothing store. Workers at the store remembered seeing her at around noon and confirmed that she'd been the one to cash the check. The clerk hadn't been able to remember if she'd been accompanied by anyone, though. Her sister was out of state visiting friends that weekend, and her roommate was still in bed when she left the house. Marta hadn't returned by the time her roommate went back to bed that evening. When she still wasn't home when her roommate woke up, she contacted authorities. 2 teenagers on their way to an unofficial dump found Marta's body early on July 4th. She was lying halfway in a creek that ran alongside the road and wasn't hidden from view. There were signs Marta had fought desperately for her life, but police determined her attacker had been much larger than her. Hair and skin found under Marta's fingernails was analyzed by the FBI, and they concluded that the person responsible had been a white male, but no other clues about the criminal were found. A few days later, her purse was found in a trash can at a gas station in Pennsylvania. Police from many districts worked with the FBI to investigate the case. Hundreds of people were interviewed. Over the years, similar crimes from the DC area were looked at to see if they were connected to the true crime case, but no definitive link between the attack on Marta was made to any other case. More than 60 years later, who took Marta's life remains a mystery, but one that authorities haven't given up finding an answer to. Number 1. The disappearance of Thomas Messick Sr. is an extremely strange missing person case, made even stranger by the fact that the FBI got involved with the case in a matter of days. Thomas was an 82-year-old man when he vanished without a trace in 2015. He was an experienced outdoorsman and had spent years teaching survival skills. He had also served in the US Army as a paratrooper. Despite his age, he still liked to go out and enjoy the outdoors. When he went missing in November of 2015, he was on an annual hunting trip with a group of friends and family members. It was their first time visiting Brant Lake in New York State, but they had all been hunting for decades before this point. A group of 7 men had made a plan for their hunting trip. 4, including Thomas, would remain in a static position, while the others would drive the deer towards their location. The stationary men were separated by less than 100 yards. They would then regroup later in the day. The trip didn't really go to plan though. They didn't see any deer and decided to call it a day at about 4:30 p.m. But when they regrouped, Thomas was nowhere to be found. Thomas was carrying a walkie-talkie, as were all the members of the group, but nobody could get a hold of him on it. The group started searching for him and got the forest rangers involved, and it was thought that he wouldn't have been able to get very far on his own. But there was no sign of Thomas. His walkie-talkie and the weapon he had been using for the hunt were also missing. It's not uncommon for searches to miss bodies, especially in densely wooded areas, but sometimes bodies are overlooked even though searches are only a few feet away. But multiple search teams went out and scoured the site in search of Thomas. It shouldn't have been possible for him to get very far. As well as his advanced age, he also had a number of medical ailments. He'd recently recovered from an illness that almost led him to canceling the trip, and he was missing an eye and suffered hearing loss due to an accident in his youth. What made this case so strange, though, was the fact that the FBI got involved only 4 days after Thomas disappeared. There was no sign of foul play, but FBI agents told Thomas's wife that there was something not right with the case. They couldn't say what, but something seemed wrong. Given the fact the FBI don't usually get involved in missing person cases, it seemed like they had reason to believe there was much more to this case. No trace of Thomas was ever found, and the case remains a mystery to this day. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.